Hello everyone and welcome to Hockey Up. I'm Brennan and today we're doing a team preview and we're looking at the Calgary Flames. Now the Calgary Flames have been a good regular season team for a while but haven't been able to make a lot of noise in the playoffs. Same can be said for this past year. They were able to take out Winnipeg in 4 but then lost to the Dallas Stars in 6. Dallas Stars did end up going all the way to the Stanley Cup Final, so there is something to be said about losing to a team that did make it to the Stanley Cup Final. But that being said, I don't think that's really going to make Calgary fans feel a lot better about what happened this past season. But I think with the offseason they had, they can expect a better team this upcoming season. We're going to start off with what they added. Now, the Calgary Flames made a lot of depth signings. They did sign a third-string goaltender in Louis Domingue. I do think that Domingue is one of the best third-string goaltenders in the NHL, and with the way that, the taxi squad works and with the whole COVID test and everything, I do imagine that Domingue is probably going to get in some games for the Calgary Flames. They also made a couple of good depth signings in Joachim Nordstrom and Dominic Simon. Simon is a player that the analytical fans really like, and he does put up some decent offensive totals for a bottom six guy. Did spend a little bit of time on Crosby's wing, and I'm sure that did inflate his totals playing for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But that being said, I do think that Simon can bring a good fourth line or maybe even third line role for the Calgary Flames. I think that Joachim Nordstrom is probably an extra forward or a fourth line guy. He brings a strong two-way game, but there really isn't a lot of offense there with Nordstrom. But then they did make a good signing in Josh Levo. I think that Levo is one of the more underrated signings this past free agency. Levo does struggle with injuries and consistency, but that being said, he is still a good middle six winger with a strong two-way game and probably 15 goal upside. But then there are two big signings from the Vancouver Canucks, Chris Tanev and Jacob Markstrom. Levo and Domingue are from Vancouver as well, so there's been kind of that whole trend of, Calgary is stealing Vancouver's players and familiarity breeds contempt. So either way, Tanev I think is a really good signing to help offset the loss of TJ Brodie. Tanev does struggle with injuries and he is a little bit older, so this contract might not look great in about 2 years' time, but Calgary is really looking at contending right now, so I would say that this is a good signing. Tanev brings a very strong defensive game, not a lot of offensive outside there, virtually none with Tanev, but they signed him to bring that solid defense and to help insulate their goaltending. And their goaltending got a hell of a lot better with the addition of Jacob Markstrom. In my opinion, I think Jacob Markstrom is a top 10 goalie in the NHL. He was probably Vancouver's MVP this past season, and in my opinion, should have been nominated for the Vezina Trophy. He did come fourth in Vezina voting, though, so this is a really big signing for the Vancouver Canucks. And there has been a lot said about the contract, $6 million at 5 years, but I honestly don't think the contract is that bad. Markstrom is kind of a late bloomer. I think that he's a goaltender that can play really well into his mid-30s, and he's 30 right now, and by the time the contract's done, he's going to be around 36, but I still think that he's going to be a very good goaltender for at least about 3 or 4 years of this contract. And when you sign these long-term deals, the truth are you probably know that by the end of the contract it might not look great, but you're trying to contend right now, and Jacob Markstrom is definitely going to help them do that. Goaltending has been the question there with Calgary for a while. They've gone through guys like Mike Smith, Cam Talbot, David Reddick, but I think that Markstrom being there finally gives them a true number one star starting goaltender in the NHL. Now, despite all that Calgary added, they actually did lose quite a bit as well. They lost some depth guys in Austin Czarnik, Tobias Reeder, Derek Forbort. Not really massive losses there. These are just guys, bottom six guys, bottom pairing guys, but these are still losses. They also lost Cam Talbot, and Talbot was actually their starter in the playoffs for them. Talbot was actually pretty good for Calgary. He did have some shaky games against the Dallas Stars, but that being said, he was their guy, and he was arguably the biggest reason why they were able to beat the Winnipeg Jets. So I do think that Talbot will be missed, but that being said, they definitely got an upgrade in Markstrom. They also lost a deadline pickup in Eric Gustafsson. Gustafsson fit in decently in Calgary, and there was rumors that he was going to end up returning there, but that wasn't the case as he ended up signing with the Philadelphia Flyers. So Gustafsson really didn't play that long in Calgary. I don't think he's going to be missed, and thankfully for Calgary, they didn't really give up a lot to get him at the deadline either, only losing a third-round draft pick. They did end up losing Travis Hamonic to the Vancouver Canucks as well. Hamonic did not end up playing for Calgary in the return to play as he chose to sit out due to family reasons and COVID and everything. And I don't think that Hamonic fit in great in Calgary in his time there. Struggled with injuries, struggled with consistency, and I know that a lot of Calgary Flames fans weren't really enamored with his play. But then they did lose a core piece in TJ Brodie. Now, as I said previously, I think Tanev helps offset that loss, but that being said, Brodie is still the better defenseman between the two, and I do think that Brodie will be missed on that Calgary blue line. Brodie is a really good two-way defender, more of a defensive type. He does make some mistakes, but that being said, his overall game is really strong, and he's been a Calgary Flame for what feels like forever. So him going to the Toronto Maple Leafs, I do think is going to be a presence that is missed on that blue line for the Calgary Flames. Calgary boasts a really interesting top six to me. I think that Dylan Dubé probably gets into this top six, as he was really good in the playoffs for Calgary, and I think he's a guy that's just primed for a breakout role. I think that Dubé is going to be a pretty good top six forward for the Calgary Flames. He was a second-round draft pick, and a few years ago was captain for Canada at the World Juniors. I think that Dubé has a lot of potential, and I really like his overall game. Michael Backlund probably still fits in as the second-line center, and say what you will about Backlund, he's still a decent player. I'm not sure if Backlund is a true second-line center at this point, probably best suited for the third line for a really good team, but I do think that Backlund does an admirable job playing that second-line center role. Elias Lindholm is a guy that really flies under the radar for the Calgary Flames. Brought in from Carolina a few years ago, Lindholm has been absolute dynamite for Calgary. His first season there, he scored 78 points, and although this year he didn't be around point per game, he still put up 29 goals in a shortened schedule due to COVID and everything. So I think that Elias Lindholm is a really good player for the Calgary Flames, and arguably one of Calgary's most underrated players, along with the likes of Andrew Mangiapane and guys like that. Then there's Matthew Tkachuk, and Tkachuk is arguably the best agitator and power forward in the NHL right now. Tkachuk does literally everything for the Calgary Flames. He's a leader. He hits, he fights, he scores, he passes. He's just got a lot of talent, and I know that a lot of fans hate him, especially Edmonton Oilers fans, but if you like Calgary, chances are you probably like Tkachuk. Tkachuk is such an effective player at all ends of the ice, and I do think that Tkachuk is probably the franchise piece for the Calgary Flames moving forward. Sean Monahan has been a good center for a while, but some questions are starting to arise about his play, as he really didn't have a great playoffs. I don't think he was necessarily the reason why Calgary got bounced in the first round again, but that being said, you do expect more from a guy who's pegged as your first-line center. I don't know how much longer Monahan plays in Calgary if he still kind of underperforms a bit. He did have a great season, just one season ago, so he's, removed from an absolutely amazing year where he scored 84 points, and I do think that Monahan is a guy that the Flames should keep around, as long as he's able to, pick up his pace in the playoffs. And then there's Johnny Gaudreau. Johnny Gaudreau had a really down year this past season, but previous to that, he's one of the best offensive wingers in the NHL. He's got 2 years left on his contract, so that means trade rumors are probably going to start floating around, especially when you consider, the consistent playoff choking from Calgary and the rumblings that they want to change up the core. I do think that Johnny Gaudreau is a really great winger for Calgary, though, and if he's able to bounce back, he's probably a piece they want to keep around as well. Calgary boasts one of the best top fours in all of Canada. Chris Tanev was a good addition and is going to bring a strong defensive game. Noah Hanifin is a young defender with a lot of upside. Hanifin was a 5th overall pick, and he hasn't lived up to that so far, but he's still really young at only age 23, and I do think that he is really going to come into his own soon. I think he's a guy that could be an under-the-radar breakout candidate and could end up, being one of Calgary's best defenders. Rasmus Andersson is another very underrated defender for Calgary. I think Andersson is going to have an amazing season this upcoming season. They did sign him to a long-term deal, and to me, I think that's going to be a great contract. Andersson is a really good young defender, and then there's their captain, Mark Giordano. Mark Giordano has been one of the best defenders in the NHL for a while now, but his career is definitely winding down. He didn't have a great season this past year, and I'm unsure of his ability to bounce back at his age. Giordano is still a great captain for Calgary. I think his number will end up being retired there, as he's played his entire career so far with the Calgary Flames. I do think that Giordano is still a top-pairing blue liner and still probably has one really good season left in him. Calgary has a really strong goaltending tandem with Jacob Markstrom and David Rittich as well. David Rittich as a backup just speaks to how good Calgary's goaltending depth is right now. Rittich is a starter on quite a few teams, and he was the starter in Calgary for a while. I don't think that Rittich is a true starter, though. He's probably best suited in that 1B role, like he's going to play with Jacob Markstrom. Jacob Markstrom, I think, is fantastic, and he should fit in well in Calgary. He played amazing in a not-so-great defensive system in Vancouver, and Calgary is a much better defensive system, so I think Jacob Markstrom could put up even better numbers and look even better. So I think that this tandem moving forward is one of the best in the NHL and is one of the best in Canada. Rittich and Markstrom should give the Calgary Flames a chance to win night in and night out, and these two guys are going to be very key pieces for Calgary this upcoming season. The Calgary Flames have a really good core of 5 players. I do think that Jacob Markstrom gets into this core 5, and so, signing a guy like him to be part of your core best players, I think, is a very good move. Markstrom is going to bring a lot to the Calgary Flames. I do think that Mark Giordano is a part of this core 5 as well, obviously. He is their best defender still, and although that could change with the likes of the young defensemen there, like Noah Hanifin and Rasmus Andersson and Juuso Valimaki, I do think that Giordano is still the guy for now. And then their forwards of Matthew Tkachuk, Johnny Gaudreau, and Sean Monahan is a very deadly combo as well. Tkachuk is fantastic. He's, a perfect hockey player in the sense that he does everything. He's a coach's dream, and although he can take some dumb penalties some nights, he draws a lot of penalties and is such a useful and effective player for the Calgary Flames. Johnny Gaudreau did struggle this past season, but like I said previously, he's probably going to be able to bounce back. He's still, 27. It's not like he's aging or on a decline or anything, but if he has another struggling season, we could end up seeing Johnny Gaudreau get moved. There has been rumors about it lately, and he has been linked to a few teams like Philadelphia. So if Calgary has a disappointing season, and if Gaudreau doesn't have a great year, this could end up being Johnny Gaudreau's last year in Calgary, as he only has 2 years left on his deal, and I'm sure Calgary doesn't want to let him walk for nothing. Sean Monahan, once again, is a good center. I'm not sure if he's a true first-line center, though. He definitely has that potential, and he looked like it a few years ago, but after having a disappointing regular season and playoffs, there has been questions about Monahan's play. I think Calgary as a whole kind of had a disappointing year this past year, and a lot of these guys had down years, but if they're able to bounce back to the form that we've seen, I think there's going to be a lot less questions about the playing ability of a guy like Sean Monahan and Johnny Gaudreau. So overall, this core 5 is really good, and I do think is a very well-rounded core 5, and it makes sense why Calgary is a good team, and this core 5 should be good enough to make them a contender. But getting into players that I want to talk about. Now, to start off, I want to talk about the very underrated Andrew Mangiapane. Now, a lot of Calgary Flames fans are big on this guy, and it makes sense. I think that Mangiapane has 20 to 25 goal upside, in the prime of his career. He's a younger forward. He's a very tenacious forward for a smaller forward as well. Mangiapane is not a big guy, coming in at about 5'9", but he plays a lot bigger than his size. He still tries to hit. He still plays a very agitating game, and I think is going to be a very big piece for the Calgary Flames for years to come. He's a guy that could end up pushing his way into a top 6 role. I think that's going to depend on how guys like Dylan Dubé and Michael Backlund perform, but I think that having Mangiapane on your third line speaks to the depth of this Calgary Flames team. But then if you look at the blue line, there's some good depth there as well, and young guys like Juuso Välimäki and Oliver Kylington. Now, I do want to start off with Välimäki, as I think Välimäki has the potential to be a top pairing blue liner in the NHL. He's putting up great numbers right now in Europe, and if he's able to stay healthy this upcoming season, I think he could really prove a lot to Calgary Flames fans. He was a first-round draft pick, and although he spent the entirety of last season injured, if he's able to bounce back from that injury and become the player that he's pegged to be, I think he's going to be a guy that Calgary Flames fans really like and could end up being a replacement guy when Mark Giordano finally hangs him up. And then Kylington is more a young offensive blue liner. Didn't really put up great totals, but you can tell he has the makings of being a decent offensive blue liner. He kind of reminds me of Victor Mete in a few ways, but obviously Kylington is a little bit bigger, and I think Kylington is probably better than Mete at this point. Kylington does have potential as being maybe a second pairing offensive blue liner, but I think it's just another good young defender there for the Calgary Flames. So despite the fact that they have an aging guy in Mark Giordano, they do have a lot of young blue liners here, and I think that this blue line is going to be very good for years to come. As far as the category goes for the Calgary Flames, I'm actually going to say that they're a contender. I think that the pieces they added this offseason has really made their lineup a lot more well-rounded. Adding a star goaltender in Jacob Markstrom is the exact piece that they needed. Calgary, their goaltending has been a question for what feels like forever, at least since the days of Mikhail Kiprusoff. So getting a guy like Markstrom finally answers that goaltending question, and as long as he's able to play like we know he can, he's going to be a great piece for the Calgary Flames. I think it's just more so whether or not this core is going to be able to get past their playoff demons. You look at this roster on paper, I do think it has the makings of a contender. They've got good forward depth, and I think that, really improving their bottom 6 is going to take some of the pressure off these guys like Johnny Gaudreau and Sean Monahan to perform. They're not going to be the only guys counted on to produce the offense. You've got guys in the bottom 6 like Mangiapane and Josh Levo. So those guys are going to be able to help, take some of that pressure off Gaudreau and Monahan, but those guys still have to perform. They still have to be stars for Calgary. So if these guys are able to perform like how we know, I do think that the Calgary Flames are a contender, but I'm not sure if they're the best team in Canada, though. They certainly could end up playing like it. I think that they are arguably the most well-rounded team in Canada. I think that, Montreal's in there as well as far as overall depth and lineup, but I think that Calgary and Toronto are kind of going to have a battle for who ends up finishing first in that division. Although I think Calgary is a contender, I don't think that they're the best team in Canada still. I'd say right now that would probably have to go to Toronto, but it's going to be interesting to see how the division shakes out. Calgary could end up finishing first in the division, or they could end up missing the playoffs. That Canadian division is so hard to predict outside of basically Toronto making it and Ottawa likely not making it. But I do think that Calgary ends up getting in there. Their overall lineup is really good, and there's a good mix of youth and experience and veterans, and I think that that's a good key asset to have as well. But that does it for today's video. I appreciate you guys watching till the end. Please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys later. Bye for now.